This recording will be made available up on the Oglala website upon its conclusion. Thank you, everybody.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, we'll continue on with where we left off. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, you sound good.
Okay. So one of the things to our history, as we all know, we lived for thousands of years upon this land. And we lived with the Pte as our relatives. And there's even stories of how we come from them, that we are a part of them, that we originated from them. So what happened to our people was when we were subjugated into coming onto the reservations, and the powers to be in Washington saw that how they would defeat us was through annihilating the buffalo, our source of subsistence, our source of livelihood, what we used to survive as a people. So not only did they slaughter the buffalo, but they used a lot of the hides and the buffalo tongues in the east, in the large cities. So they sent these hides to the east and made clothes with them, coats and different items like that. And they also took the buffalo tongues and shipped them east, and so it became like a delicacy in the restaurants on the East Coast, New York and Washington D.C. and Baltimore and Boston and those towns like that had a lot of a high population of people. So in the 1800s, around this time, you would find buffalo tongue on the menus, and it was really expensive, and it was like a delicacy. So they used that as a market to kind of like wipe out the buffalo, but to almost like justify it. But what they were trying to do is annihilate us and our way of life. So the last great herd there was a herd that was found and spotted in the Slim Buttes area in what is now northwest South Dakota, in the Slim Buttes area. I think one of the nearest towns is Buffalo, South Dakota. So they asked Sitting Bull and the Hunkwapas, whoever wanted to join him, to go on a buffalo hunt and kill these buffalo. So there was an estimated herd of about 1,000 or so that was there. So the Hunkwapas struck their teepees and came to this area, and they were given the opportunity to hunt these buffalo. And what they wanted to do is totally exterminate them. And there was a man, his last name was Dupree. He got, I think, something like 10 head and cut them out of the main herd, and he kept them, and he took them back to the Cheyenne River Reservation, and he started a herd, his own, I guess, personal herd, which was kind of hard to understand because the government wanted to wipe him out completely. So how they allowed him to do that, I don't know. But fortunately, he was able to do it. So that part of that herd survived. There was like 10 to 15 head of buffalo that survived. and the rest were all killed. And of course, the Hmuya jumped at the opportunity because they wanted to taste the buffalo meat for the last time, get the hides and tan them and have the last buffalo robes and like that, to taste the buffalo for the last time. So they jumped at the opportunity, and so they went and went on this hunt at that time. And then they discovered also a herd inside what is now Yellowstone National Park, and they allowed them to live. So they, of course, there was like several hundred, maybe close to 1,000 head in there. So when the national parks were established, and that herd was protected, so people could no longer go in there and hunt them. But at one time, they allowed like the Blackfeet and the Crow people to go in there and hunt them, but in limited numbers. They didn't let them kill by like 100 or like that. So so that herd there and was the last purebred herd left. So when they established Wind Cave National Park, they brought buffalo from Yellowstone and started to grow them there, and they've gone into the hundreds now. And then Custer State Park also got some of those buffalo, and so those two, the Yellowstone herd and the Wind Cave herd, are the last purebred herds left. And now they've shared some of the Yellowstone ones to the Oglala Sioux parks, and up at the Blackfeet up in Montana, and some tribes in Canada also obtained some. So ironically, the native people are in possession of the purebred herds, because the reason I say purebred is there's some buffalo that are crossed with domestic cattle. So the one that they cross them with is the Charolais. If you ever see a herd of cows, there's some large cows that they're white in color. So they breed them with them, and then they become what they call beefalo. So there used to be some there in that pasture going towards the Sundance grounds. There was some there, and they're real kind of mean, and I mean they're aggressive, really aggressive. A couple times, some of them chased my truck. So it must be the crossing of their genes or their bloodline that caused them to be like that, I guess. But so that's how we've come to where we are now. So so the native people, including the Oglala Sioux people, owned pure blood buffalo now. But there is buffalo in existence that are mixed with domestic cattle. So it's kind of like how we've become too, to the intermarriage of other races, and we've become mixed with other nationalities of people, so like the buffalo, we were crossed with other races. And so but there's still full-blood people among us, people that are not of any nationality. So for thousands of years, we followed the buffalo, and they taught us the social boundaries, the social way of living, the custom, the spiritual laws, the custom laws, how we exist as a people. We learned and we emulated the buffalo. So the bulls come to the outside like the warriors of long ago, and they protect the sickly and the elderly and the helpless, the children. That's how they do it. And then when a herd of buffalo moves, and the sickly buffalo and the elders dictate the pace of how fast they move. And the same with a pack of wolves. So when they stay with the old ones and the sick ones, and they never leave them behind, and they determine the pace. So that's what the buffalo also do too. So there's a relationship and the kinship between us and the Pteoyate, the Buffalo Nation, as relatives. The Buffalo Nation respects the environment, will wrap their tongue around the grass, plants, and break it off, thereby preserving the roots and enabling the plants to grow again. Whereas like domestic cattle will eat the grass and the plants down to the roots. So whenever they graze somewhere, they just leave bare ground. But we have buffalo up in the hills and porcupine that our Teospai own, and they never overgraze. So if you go in there into that pasture, it would seem like there's no livestock there, or no buffalo there, because you don't see the grass eaten down anywhere, down to the dirt. So I talked with the BIA one time, and I said, those of us that grow buffalo, that raise buffalo, we should be allowed to have more animal units per acre than what the ranchers have for cows, because buffalo don't overgraze. So they said, yeah, but I don't think it'll go anywhere, because they're steadfast, and they don't want people to start growing buffalo and bringing that way of life back, because there's really not like, say you can feed a cow and keep feeding him, and he'll keep eating and eating and eating till he'll probably die, eat himself to death. But a buffalo will only eat so much, just what it needs to survive. So I don't care if you put hay in front of him, or these other supplements that they feed cattle, and you put it in front of him, he's going to only eat so much to survive. He's not gonna let you fatten him up like a cow. You could feed a cow and put all this weight on him, and he'll continue to eat, so that when you get him to the market, you'll make more money off of him because he weighs more. But you can't do that with buffalo. So the ranchers on the reservation are kind of like, they hold, they don't care for the people that raise buffalo. But yet, if the whole reservation turned to raising buffalo, the environment will come back. The plants will come back. Even the birds will come back. The different animals that used to roam in our lands will return. So there's things that are becoming extinct among our people, like different birds and different plants. And when I was younger, when I used to go dig medicine with my grandfather, certain types of medicine were everywhere. And then it's harder and harder to find different types of medicine, the medicinal plants. So when buffalo graze, they eat medicinal plants. Eating buffalo meat is eating medicine. So there's many different kinds of plants out there that will help a person's body in healing. There's plants for, say, if you're anemic, or there's plants for intestinal problems. There's plants for infection in your body. There's plants to rebalance your body so that you wouldn't get things like diabetes and heart problems and cancer, because these illnesses come because our bodies have become out of balance. So these buffalo eat these medicine when they graze. And so when we eat the flesh of the buffalo, we're eating those same medicinal plants. And then the protection of the young is primary. So if you ever, whenever you've seen the video on YouTube of the woman getting hooked by buffalo and it drug her around, tore her pants off, she made the mistake of trying to pet a buffalo calf. And it wasn't the mother that did that to her, but it was a bull, a young bull that was right nearby. So he knows his job was to protect that little calf, buffalo calf. So he went after that woman because he didn't know what she was trying to do. So he thought that she was trying to harm that calf. So that's why he went after her, did that to her. So that's primary in their existence, to protect the young. And there's a matriarchal social structure there's an Unchi buffalo as the head of the family or extended family. So sometimes you will see in any herd, wherever you go, you will see some bulls that are off by themselves. And so the reason for this is this Unchi bull will not allow these bulls to interbreed with their own relatives. So because they recognize their Tioshpais, so she drives them out of the herd to be by themselves, graze by themselves, because they don't want that crossing of the bloodlines. So that's why it's important, like say, to bring in, if you have a herd of buffalo, to bring in, as they say, new blood. So bring in new bulls or new cows to breed so that the bloodline isn't crossed. So after the great slaughter of the buffalo during the 1800s, the number of bison remaining alive in North America declined from 60 million to as low as 541 in 1890. So that's counting the buffalo that Mr. Dupree took and counting the buffalo that were in Yellowstone. So these buffalo that were in Yellowstone were protected by the United States once they went under the laws of the national parks. So people were no longer, even Native people were no longer allowed to go inside there and hunt. So now I think that herd is probably in the thousands now. That's in Yellowstone, but there's no boundary fences. So sometimes these buffalo come out into the adjoining ranchers' pastures, so they shoot them because they're afraid that these buffalo carry a sickness called brucellosis. So they're afraid that it'll infect their herds and the domestic cattle herds, and make them sick. So that's why they use that. They use that opportunity to shoot them, but part of it is also because they don't want these buffalo competing with their cows for pasture land, for grass. So that's why they do that. So there's an impact from the disconnection from Teoete, the Buffalo Nation. So the Wotaki Ogana Pteoyate Kikichi Okijupikte, reconnecting to the Pteoyate as relatives. So at that last hunt, that Sitting Bull and his Wačiŋtjanka-to and his people fought at, did in the Slim Buttes area of northwest South Dakota. He said, a cold wind blew across the prairie when the last buffalo fell, and it was a death wind for my people, he said. So this is a quote from him, and I think he saw the impact of what it was going to do to us as a people because of the spiritual reasons and also the physical reasons. So I have there's a movie on Stars that it's about a crazy horse, and the actor is Victor Mature, who plays Crazy Horse. So I watched this over and over. You can get it on Stars, and the reason I watch it is there's people. This was filmed in the Black Hills here. I think it was at both Wind Cave and Custer State Park. And then part of it was filmed by Richard Table. The Battle of Little Bighorn depiction was filmed at Richard Table, west of Richard Village. But what I find remarkable is these people, if you watch that movie, these people are all lean people. There's no overweight people in that movie. Even the elderly, the unchis and the kakas are all lean, and these young men are lean, and you can see them just spring up and jump onto these horses. And this was filmed in 1953. So, and some of those old men were from the 1800s that are in there, and one of them was my grandfather, Ben American Horse, who fought at the Little Bighorn at the age of 12. So they show him in that movie. He's dressed as a chief. And he was wounded through the leg, and I was fortunate to see his wound when I was about 10 years old. So he passed away close to 100 years old. I think he was 98 years old. And so I see that, and then I see the difference in when you watch the movie Dances with Wolves. You can see our people who probably are the ancestors or descendants of a lot of those people in that movie there. And a lot of the people in that movie are overweight. There's a scene where the village is moving, and there's several young women walking dressed traditionally, and they're overweight, which wasn't like that long ago, because we rode horses and walked all the time, ate buffalo, and the buffalo ate the medicine. So and the difference in that time from 1953 to now, you could see a lot of difference in our people. So I just wanted to, if you have smart TV and wanted to check it out, then you can see the difference in our people. So that's the Crow chief Plenty-Coup said, when the buffalo went away, we became changed people. Idleness that was never with us in buffalo days has stolen much from both our minds and bodies. The hearts of my people fell to the ground, and they could not lift them up again. So the impact on the Oyate forced on reservations can no longer follow the Pte Oyate, the Buffalo Nation, to the sacred sites. So for a while there, the spiritual journey was stopped. Disconnection from the spiritual journey into the Wichachbi Oyate, the Star Nation. So there was a time when we couldn't leave the reservation. We had to get the agency superintendent's consent. He had to okay it, and you had to have a reason for going. And he actually signed a paper. And when you returned from your trip, you had to sign a paper proving that you came back. So we no longer can perform a sacred duty to creation. The wiping of tears ceremony for all of creation at Preshla is one example. The Pte Oyate, the Buffalo Nation, and the Wichachbi Oyate, the Star Nation, are the guides for the people, and when disconnected from them, the Lakota Oyate became lost and live in chaos and confusion. To this day, we see it all around us all of the time. One example is our young people are committing suicide and also killing each other. So reconnecting with the Pteoyate, the Buffalo Nation. So we must continue the spiritual journey to the sacred sites, or make offerings according to the spiritual calendar. Make offerings on behalf of the Pteoyate, the Buffalo Nation. Continue to acknowledge their sacredness and connection to our existence. Follow their teachings and lifestyle. Follow spiritual calendar. Conserve, protect the young. Honor the matrilineal way. Make offerings to the unchi of the herd when asking to take one of her relatives. So all of these come into the spiritual and the natural laws that we lived in. So we always acknowledge their sacredness and our connection to them. So that's why you see a buffalo skull in the Sundance altar, and that's why you see a buffalo skull in front of the Inipi. At any sweat lodge, you see a buffalo skull, and then we lay our sacred pipes on top of the skull, on the forehead, or on the horns. So we connect the sacred pipe with the sacred Pteoyate, which both of them are at the center of our existence. So when you do that, you put an altar, buffalo down like that. It's called a buffalo altar. Pteoyäŋka, it's called. That's a buffalo altar. So it's kind of like a mobile church. You can take a buffalo skull and your chanupa, go anywhere on top of a hill, any place, put some sage down, put your skull on top of it, fill your chanupa, and sit down there and pray. And it'll be like you're in an altar at that time. So that's something that our ancestors did. So examples of following the spiritual calendar. So on December 21st, Wačiŋtjanka, it's called, the winter solstice offerings are made, because that is done in the winter camps wherever we camp. One of our favorite winter camps was in the Platte River Valley, where is now the town of Bridgeport, and the town of Scotts Bluff. And that area is where we, the Oglala people, used to winter. We stayed there in that valley, because it seems like even today, when we're freezing and we're cold, down in that area, it's always warm. They get snow, but it's not very, very deep. And it's enough to replenish the land. And game is really easy to find in that area. There's large herds of antelope and deer in that area. And at one time, probably the buffalo. So we used to make our offerings there in our winter camps. And then some of our people used to winter up close to the Black Hills, in the area around where Hot Springs is now, the town of Hot Springs. That was a winter camp there too. So we made our offerings in the winter camps, and for the winter solstice, which solstice means the sun reached the furthest to the west, to the south. So that was the shortest day of the year, and then it starts back after that. So when the sun reaches the highest, then it's the summer solstice, and that's when we would do our sun dances. So, and then on March 21st, it's welcome back the Sunday ceremony at Hmuya imitates an owl mountain, aka Blackout Peak in the Black Hills. So that means the sun has reached halfway back to its journey to the north and to its highest point. So and then one is coming up now, September 21st is the fall equinox, and then March 21st is the spring equinox. So equinox means where the sun has reached halfway between. So when the sun representing the fire lights the sacred pipe in the sky, we know we must light our sacred pipes on earth. So from the Big Dipper, it represents to us, the 7 stars represent the 7 sacred laws, the 7 council fires, Ocheti Shakoi, and the 7 sacred ceremonies. And then we add one more, the 7 generations. So there's 28 there. And so we use 28 willows in Inipi Oinikage, and we have 28 poles in the Sundance Lodge. What we call Tiokijo Wakan. And the sun represents the fire lighting the sacred chanupa. So when we have our pipe ceremony on earth here at Hmuya, then in the sky, the spirits have their pipe ceremony, which is signified by the sun going through the Big Dipper. So we were organized and followed Lakota protocol. So here's an Oglala camp circle, 1879. So there's the Wagluche, which is the loafers. These people settled in the town of what is now Pine Ridge, and then towards the west, and towards where Slim Buttes is. The Oyuchbe who were Crazy Horse and Big Roads band, settled in the community of Manderson. Iteshita are the bad faces, the true Oglala's original. So they settled in the town of Pine Ridge. The Wajaje from Wazaza to cut leather in strips and fringes. They settled in the creek along Porcupine. The break into, or it should be also bite into, the Kiuksa. So they settled in what is now Kyle in that area. And then the Taupishlicha are the people that settled around Allen and towards where the town of Martin is now. And then the Oyuchbe, there was another band called Oyuchbe, pushed aside. Trakshunkewitko broke off and formed another camp, and he was joined by the Khayabia. So when Crazy Horse was killed, a lot of these people that were Oyuchbe that followed him, they went and joined into the Khayabia people. So there's 2 Oyuchbe bands, but it was because Crazy Horse broke off and formed his own camp circle. So the Khayabia were joined with him, and then they broke off back into their own original band, and the Oyuchbe that were with them kind of like melted into this band. So these people are north of what is now Red Cloud School, all in that area there. But there's a lot of relatives of the people in Manderson that live there, because there's Oyuchbe that are still there in that community. So like 1879, when this was taken, this was written down at a Sundance south of White Clay, Nebraska. The people that documented this thought that this is how the people always camped. But these 7 bands camped like this in a circle, but the place of honor, the Wajaje, was at this time in the place of honor, opposite the opening of the camp circle. So Wajaje at that time were probably the ones that were conducting the Sundance. They were the hosts for the Sundance. So the holy men from their band must have been conducting the Sundance and overseeing it. And they were probably helped by the Iteshita, who was camped beside them. So at any time, say, Battle of the Little Bighorn, the Oglalas camped in a circle. The Oyuchbe were at where what the Wajaje are now. So, and it was because Crazy Horse was a major leader at that time, in the time of war. So if you see whatever was happening at the time, it would determine who was there in that place of honor opposite the opening of the camp circle. So they would be on the west side of the camp circle, the Wajaje. So it changed. It was constantly changing, depended on who was doing what at the time and taking the role as the leaders at that time. So like I said, this was an 1879 Sundance circle. So Wajaje must have been conducting, or their holy men must have been conducting the Sundance. So in 1876, along the Little Bighorn River, the Oyukhbe down here, up here, were there in the place of honor, because Crazy Horse was leading actually practically the whole camp along with Sitting Bull. So it would determine what is going on at the time for whoever was camped at the place of honor, the Chatku. So that's one thing that the researchers and the people that came among our people, when they documented this, they probably went back and said, oh, this is how the Oglalas camped, and this is how they've camped for hundreds and thousands of years. But what they don't know is that it's constantly moving this circle. So not everybody was always at a certain place. So this camp circle is here in the Sundance 1879. So these Wagaluche and the Oyukhbe with the Prayabia were probably, from their bands, was probably the warrior societies that were doing the policing in camp at that time. So that's why they're both at the end of the horn. Just both at the end of the entrance. So they were probably the Akichita. Their warrior societies were the camp police at that time. So this is a breakdown of how the Oyate Tchaomaniche, the people's way of governance. So you notice there's 4 Inila Wota, the silent eaters, and they made decisions on all, they decided on all matters of the Oyate. And then there was 4 Wakichunze, and there was 4 Wichasha Yatapika. And then the Nacha were the chosen headmen of the Tioshpai. Then the Ozuya and the women warriors, which were called the Katela, the women warriors. And then the people of the tribe. But you got to remember, this isn't like a hierarchy. These people all interacted and based their decisions on consensus. So nobody actually was above anybody else. And that's how our Tioshpais were set up and our camp circles were set up. So when we first had contact with the Washitus, they said, we want to see the man in charge, the head man. So they looked at each other, the Lakotas, and they said, there's no such person. So they said, well, we want to deal with one man who will speak for everybody, which was totally foreign to us. You know, to us as a people, there was never, ever such a person. So they said, you have to have somebody that's a leader that speaks for all of you. So they said, well, if that's what they want, then okay. They said. So they chose a man named Conquering Bear. So he became the spokesman for all of them, but they did not make him the leader of all of them. They just made him the spokesman. And what happened to him was he got in the Grattan battle. I'm not going to say massacre, because when they lose, they call it a massacre. But when they lose, it's a massacre. So it wasn't a massacre. They came there with their guns, Lieutenant Grattan, and he had 80 soldiers with him. And they demanded this man, his name was Straight Forehead, and he was a Hochwoju. And what happened was they were camped down there by Fort Laramie. They were there to get their goods according to the treaty, but they were slow in bringing their goods. So the people were hungry because they were in a large camp. So this group of Mormons were going by on the Oregon Trail, and one of their cows, an old cow that was real tough to eat, they had to boil it for a long time to eat it, ran away from them and went into the camp. So this Hochwoju guy shot it with a bow, and then they butchered it and passed it on among each other. So Lieutenant Grant, this Mormon guy, demanded this man, this Hochwoju, be brought to justice. So he came with 80 men and tried to arrest this guy, this Hochwoju guy. So they they told Conquering Bear to talk with them because they wanted to meet a head guy. So a battle started and they wiped out all the soldiers, all 80 of them. But in the meantime, they wounded Conquering Bear. So he died of his wounds some days later. So they realized that at that time that if you're supposedly the leader of everybody, then they're going to assassinate you. So nobody wanted to be that person again. So that's a story of what happened to our people at that time. And you can read about it in the history books, but this is what happened. So pre-reservation days, this was the people's way of governance. Pre-reservation days. And then this existed up to 1901. They switched to a governance called Okashpeyamani, which took 2/3 of the people's votes to pass anything. And then in 1934, we went into the IRA government. So this is a map showing Koche and Gununipi, the loss of the land. So all of the area on the orange is the 1868 boundaries. And then 1889, they broke it down to this. And then the boundaries today are the ones that are in real dark. So they managed to take this in 1889. They took these lands here. So, and these were taken before that. These were taken along with when they took the Black Hills in 1877. They took the Black Hills. They took all of this area, the orange area. So if they followed the boundaries, we would own all the way to the Bighorn Mountains. So Sheridan, Wyoming, Buffalo, Wyoming, Billings, Montana, all the way up in here, up into North Dakota, down following the river will be ours. So it says east bank of the Missouri River. So that means we own the river too. If you were to honor the treaties and enforce them, we own the river in this area, all the way up here into North Dakota. So this is how much land we had. Now we're pushed onto where these dark are, the boundaries today, we're pushed into those areas. So the challenges that we inherited and experienced: historical traumatic events, massacres, violation of treaties, negative boarding school experiences, federal policies designed to assimilate, land theft, federal relocation program, the outlawing of spiritual ceremonial practices. So in the 1878, 79, somewhere in there, they passed the Indian Offenses Act. So that means that if you performed a ceremony of any type, you were breaking a federal law. And there's a whole list of ceremonies and practices that are under this law. So one would be Hunka ceremony, Sundance, Inipi, all of these ceremonies that we practice, giveaways, naming ceremonies are all fall under this law. So in 1978, they passed the Indian Religious Freedom Act, but it's not. People say that it's historical and it gave us a right to do things, but it's not. It doesn't have, like, as they say in legal terms, it doesn't have no teeth. So whenever we went, several times, 5 times, we've gone before the Supreme Court on sacred site issues, protection of sacred sites, and every one of them, the Native people lost them. And even when they went on this under this law, it's still the Supreme Court ruled against it. So the Native people lost. So it's not really, it's there, but it's kind of more like, to me, it's almost like a symbolic law, if anything. It doesn't really, it's not going to help you win a court case. So the current traumatic events, the history of traumatic experiences, and our exposure to trauma, disconnection from our rejection of Lakota cultural lifeways, which has resulted in grief, trauma, and chaos. So as recently as not just a few weeks ago, there was a clash between the people in reservation and church group that's right along the White River there near the ranger station, and they were passing out pamphlets denouncing and putting down our sacred ceremonies. And even one of our holy men who's no longer with us, Leonard Crowdog, they said things about Russell Means, who is no longer among us. So I look at it as it's never stopped. It's the traumatic things that we go through. It's still happening to this day. So this man who passed out these pamphlets as part of this church group, now he's been escorted off the reservation, but that still exists there. And we're always constantly fighting for, our way of life. We have to prove it. And if you want to, do something in one of the schools on reservation, as far as like cultural, maybe a ceremony or maybe a wiping of tears ceremony or something, then you're gonna be met with resistance. So it's we're still fighting that way of thinking. It's still there among us, among our people. Not really a lot of times, sometimes, among our own people, but most of it is from outside influences. So we'll stop there for now. And anybody have any comments, questions? We can do that here with the time we have left.
There's no questions in the chat.
Okay. All right.
Chair, I got a question. In keeping documentation of how we're trying to help our own and data and to show how effective it is, and realize in helping in a way that's more effective than the current system going on in the Rapid City in South Dakota and the upper Midwest. Providing this documentation, do you think that would help in a court case that we're talking about, you was talking about?
I think it would.
Uh-huh.
In fact, maybe Mahasani can help me with this, but there's a Dr. Brenda Freeman who documented and wrote down the effects of traditional healing on how it helped the young people during the Nagiki Chopi
Uh-huh.
era. So maybe Mahasani, you could elaborate a little more on that.
Good evening, everybody. Mitaku Yepi, my relatives. First of all, Bopila Mahasani for your information. And regarding that question, there's an article. It's called The Value of Lakota Traditional Healing. And Dr. Brenda Freeman and Dr. Ken Cole did a study on 27 families whose children received Lakota traditional healing, like they're getting their Lakota name, their the Wopaŋtјaŋka-to, Woapia, the doctoring, and they found that the families had also benefited. So their family functioning increased positively for after receiving those traditional healing interventions. So that I think, Jepkoshi Annie, you have that article, or you might have access to it that can be shared with the participants.
I do. I'll post it up on the Oiluta website for everybody. I'll put the website address in here.
Okay, thank you.
That answer your question.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Any other comments or questions?
Mahasani,
Yeah.
I was wanting to ask Chingshi Joe if he could comment. I know that he did some interviews with people about the impact of Lakota traditional healing through the Black Hills Center for American Indian Health some years ago. So maybe Chingshi, you could comment on the outcome of that, or what you learned from that.
Yeah. Back in 2006, I was working with, in collaboration with the Black Hills Center for American Indian Health. And during that period of time, there were interviews conducted with two of our Wakan Iyeska. One was the late Lekshi Roy Stone, and one was with Arte Rick here, and among other individuals that received traditional healing from the two aforementioned Wakan Iyeska. And what we had discovered and I guess deciphering all of this information was that not only did it impact the individual and I guess the family nucleus, it also impacted the surrounding Tioshpai, the extended family as well. It spread out, and that was in both interviews with different families from on both sides with the Wakan Iyeska. It not only just impacted, like I said, the individual, but also went beyond the family nucleus and into the Tioshpai. So that was something that was really something, because in turn, individual families, kind of reciprocated this by taking their, I guess, their own welfare and healing and sharing it with the extended family. That's it too.
Still. Any other questions, comments? As they say on the council meetings, hearing none.
Thank you, Lexi, for your teachings. And for those that do not know this, the teaching will be made available up on the Oyaluta YouTube site, and then eventually it gets up to the website itself. Did you want to have somebody close?
Mahasani, can you close us?
Wopila kanka mitaku yapi for taking the time to listen in and to learn. There's lots of teachings from the De Oyate that if we put into practice every day, whether it's in our families or schools or communities, then I think our communities and our people would be healthier. So I really appreciate the teaching tonight. So I'll go ahead and close. Tukashila na unchi wopila tkanka ngeni chapile wo onspe unki chupi kilila wopila tkanka hechaya na mahasani Iyeska ni tawa Hmuya mani ki wo ke wash ake waji wechila na mitaku yapi uha na tukashila ushi wichakila pia na wangla ke wichaku pia mitaku ye oyasi. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Wopila.